Welcome to the Listen Up podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hey, everybody. It's Dr. Mark Sims here. I'm the host of the Listen Up podcast, where I feature top leaders in healthcare. This episode is brought to you by Arizona Hearing Center. I help patients to effectively treat their hearing loss so they can better connect with their family and friends and remain independent. The reason I'm so passionate about this is I lost my brother Robbie twice. First, to the hearing loss from radiation to his brain tumor. It took his hearing gradually in his 20s, 30s, and 40s, and I watched how it affected him. And then again, he succumbed to the side effects of the tumor. I care only for ears. I'm the E of ENT, and I've performed over 10,000 surgeries over the past 20 years. I'm the founder of Arizona Hearing Center, and I've written a book called Listen Up. You can go to www.listenuphearing.com to learn more about the book. And in terms of my clinical practice, you can go to www.azhear.com. I'm really excited. Today, I have Jacob Iveland. He's a doctor of audiology at South Bay Audiology. He joined South Bay several years ago. He obtained his bachelor's of arts degree in speech, language, hearing, and science at University of Minnesota, and then got his doctorate at University of Pacific. He's extremely passionate about cochlear implants, and we're going to have a great time exploring that today. He's also volunteered at Northern Voices School, which is a oral listening school for hearing impaired children to learn how to use their listening and spoken language. In his free time, Jacob enjoys traveling, beach volleyball, kickball trivia nights, watching Netflix, and playing songs on his guitar. I'm really excited to have you here, Jacob. Welcome to Listen Up. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, glad to be here.
That's great. So, Jacob, one of the questions I love to ask people is I'm always, I love to hear their story of, you're a doctorate of audiology. How did you get here? What led you to making that decisions? What sparked your interest?
It's personal for me. So I was actually born with a hearing loss in both of my ears, and I've been wearing hearing aids since the age of 3. So hearing aids and hearing loss is something I've known for a very long time. It does run in my family. So my dad also wears hearing aids. He's one of my patients. My uncle wears hearing aids. He's one of my patients. My aunt needs hearing aids. My grandma, if she was still alive, would be one of my patients. So one day when I do have kids, I will likely be their audiologist as well. So it just runs in my family. It's something that, I've known throughout my whole life. And then my audiologist growing up lived 2 blocks down from me. And so him and I just had a really solid relationship, and he's been a instrumental part of my education all the way to the moment I did receive my diploma for audiology. So that's kind of why I do what I do. It's very personal. I wanted to make sure I was being taken care of, with my own hearing, and I wanted to provide that for my family as well.
That's great. It's almost like you were always destined to be an audiologist.
Mm-hmm. In fact, in graduate school, you learn about what's called an individualized education plan, an IEP.
Yeah.
Any child with a disability has one. And when I learned about it, I'm like, I remember hearing about IEPs when I was in school. So I called my school district up and asked them for my IEPs, and they gave me a document about this thick.
Yeah.
It took me about 2 days to read through it. And in a report, when I was in 3rd grade, they asked me what I wanted to be, and it said I wanted to be an audiologist. So
truly we're destined to be an audiologist. Well, that's great, because it implies that was the person you found helping you the most, and you wanted to be that same helping type of individual. I assume that's the nature of it.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful. And so, as somebody who has hearing loss, you let's say you have the insider secrets. I'm kidding a little, but you have the insight thing. So, as an individual who has treated hearing loss, like, what would be some of the insights you would pass on to people that you get? Like, so, I don't have hearing loss, right? And so I try to understand it, but like, if somebody said, okay, you walk the walk, you talk the talk, what are some of the insights that some other people who don't have hearing loss have that you've kind of come to realize as somebody who suffers hearing loss and treats it?
I think the insight is, I think a lot of hearing individuals don't realize how frustrating it is to miss something that wasn't important. And an example of that is I will get frustrated with my own parents. They will say something to me, And I will say, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Can you say it? And they will say, oh, never mind. It wasn't important. That is the most frustrating thing you can say to someone with hearing loss. It doesn't matter if it wasn't important. Just the fact that we were not able to participate in that conversation. And now you've chosen to never let us to participate, if that can be a hard thing to deal with. And so I think that's something that my patients, I can relate with them on that, because it's not something a hearing person realizes is important. Why it wasn't important what I said. Why do you need to hear it again? Doesn't matter what you said. It's just the fact that I want to be able to hear the word that you said. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, life's about the little moments, right? The little things, right? And not everything we say to each other is monumental, right? I mean, it's not like, stop, I'm going to say something profound. It's the little things of life that make us connected, right? So I think that's what you're alluding to, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I tell patients that hearing loss is like baseball, but it's harder because in baseball, you get 3 strikes, and in hearing loss, you get 2. So, you say something, somebody says something, you say, what? They repeat it, you say, huh? And then they say, forget it. Now you're describing 1 strike. You're only getting 1 strike, but it's no more than 2. People won't repeat it after 2. And I think that's what you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing that my perspective puts it at ease for a patient is, I don't like to recommend a solution or a product that I have not tried personally. Huh. And so usually whenever there's a new release, I always, fit it on myself first, wear it for a couple of weeks, just so I can get the nuances of how to adjust it on your own, to understand what is happening in a noisy environment, so that when someone is told that they need help with their hearing and they're deciding to move forward in the process, they can move forward knowing that the person that they're moving forward with knows exactly what they're going to experience. And if they experience something in a negative way, they know how to adapt to it. If they feel it's something in a positive way, then we can both share in that, experience. So I think that given me a nice insight that I do experience all of my hearing aids and amplification before I dispense it. Other than cochlear implants, I can't experience that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. So just no names. If there are any that you warn, you're like, nope, not going to use it.
With no names?
No, don't mention the names of the devices, but have there been hearing aids that you've tried and you're like, nope, I'm not going to use this hearing aid?
There definitely are.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, again, that's not something I experience, right? So, it's an interesting insight in terms of all those things. So one of the things you said in the pre-interview is that you're passionate about cochlear implants, and I assume some of that stems from your own hearing loss. But tell me your pathway or your journey to that in terms of why. It's a wonderful passion. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just curious how you got there. I love the story.
I think, I've always known hearing aids, and that worked for me. I worked for two hearing aid manufacturers at one point in my life, and it worked for me. I know a lot about it. And then all of a sudden, you start to learn more about cochlear implants, and you realize how much more they can benefit a patient who's not benefiting from hearing aids. I think the thing that really sparked my interest was a couple years ago at an audiology conference. I sat in on a cochlear implant session where I wanted to learn more about cochlear implants. And I think at some point in the session, and I'm probably going to get some of these stats wrong, but you'll get the general picture. They said that in America, we have about 50 million people with hearing loss.
Right.
Of those 50 million, 15% or so have severe to profound hearing loss. That's about 7 to 8 million people. Of those 7 to 8 million people, most of them are probably cochlear implant candidates. I would say most of them are. And the presentation said that only about 5 to 10% have ever even been told that they might be a cochlear implant candidate. And I just thought that was a pretty amazing statistic, that millions and millions of people who could be benefiting from a cochlear implant have never even heard of it, or even have been told that they might be a candidate. And so that's why I'm so interested in it, because I've seen patients, my own patients, who are struggling in hearing aids. And if we can get them to, understand a cochlear implant and realize that, a surgery can really catapult them in their hearing experience, then I'm going to do it. And so I think my goal is to try to take that 10% and try to make it a lot larger, and really let people know, if they have hearing loss that's within a range that's going to be difficult for a hearing aid, then let's talk about implants and let's have a real conversation about
Yeah. So the sad part is the rate of people entering into candidacy is greater than the rate of people being implanted. So and so if you look at any disease, COVID-19 or something like that, that's when it's in the pandemic phase, right? When the incidence is outgrowing the rate of treatment.
it.
And so it is an expanding pool. And I think you're absolutely right about awareness. And so when you explain to patients, a cochlear implant, like how do you try to communicate them the difference between a hearing aid and a cochlear implant?
I like to talk about the full spectrum of what we can do for hearing loss. I do use a chart, and I think it helped patients understand, when you're just starting off, you have just a mild loss, you really can get by with something, low cost. You don't need all the bells and whistles, and you can really notice a significant improvement in your quality of life. Eventually, your hearing loss is going to get poor, and your needs are going to be more demanding. And so just a hearing aid by itself is going to be perfect.
Right.
Then there's another spectrum where hearing gets even more challenging, and you need the use of additional accessories. You need to give your spouse a microphone, or you need to connect something to your TV. You're still going to be successful with hearing aid. You just need a little bit of an addition. And there becomes a point when none of that works. And that's when an implant is really the next step. So I lay out, these are all the solutions. And you've tried all of these, and we're still not getting to a point where you're hearing the way you want to. There's one solution left, and that's when I start talking about it. And I often lean on my previous patients, patients who have gone through it. And I do share their results. I say, for example, one of my patients is in her 40s, with her hearing aids, was understanding 33% of the word being said. And then within 5 weeks after being activated with her implant, she's now at 92%.
Wow.
She's a rock star patient. And within 5 weeks being able to do that, yes, she's young and she's in her 40s and she was able to do that well that quickly, but she was motivated to the whole process. And if someone's motivated enough and you really want to hear better, then you can potentially get there too. So I oftentimes rely on my patients who have done well to help, patients, get through that barrier of considering a cochlear implant.
Yeah, we tell our patients that it needs practice, right? In other words, it's an instrument that you have to learn how to use. And so the people who are motivated do that. And, obviously there is a cognitive capacity issue with your patient in the 40s, but it doesn't mean somebody who's on the latter half of their life can't do spectacularly as well if they're highly motivated.
Right.
And then they ask you, what's the difference between the two in terms of how they work? What do you tell people?
I usually say that when you have perfect hearing, you have 20 pianos that you can play, and you're going to hear every note of every single piano that you have. When you have hearing loss, you only get one piano, and we're going to take away all, maybe half the black keys and like a third of the white keys. You're still going to hear a lot of the music, but it's not going to be all there. When you have an implant, it's like hearing with boxing gloves, and you're playing a piano with boxing gloves. And if you do that in a certain pattern, you can still understand speech really well. And so I say, it's not going to be as good as if you had normal hearing. And if you had enough usable piano keys, a hearing aid is going to sound great. But if you have a piano with only 4 keys, you're not going to hear well with 4 keys. You're going to hear better with gloves, and you're going to be able to hit more keys with the gloves. So I think I kind of use that analogy to try to help patients understand, how specific, an implant's going to work. I don't want to give them the illusion that they're going to get all 20 pianos back, and I don't want them to think they're going to get even one piano back. But I do believe that even with the mittens, you're going to hear a lot more.
Sure.
So I kind of use that analogy when I compare the two.
No, that's great. Thanks for sharing it. And so both, your hearing aid patients and your cochlear implant patients, one of the big complaints is hearing in noise, right? Hearing in background noise, restaurants, multiple speakers, parties, and stuff like that. What do you tell them about that? One, about expectations, and two, strategies to improve that.
The expectation is with noise is that I try to relate it to someone with no hearing loss at all. In Los Angeles, a lot of the restaurants are very fancy, a lot of glass walls, a lot of flat surfaces. Los Angeles restaurants are hard for a lot of people to hear in. And I say, when you go to a restaurant and if you're having difficulty with noise, I don't want you to focus so much on your difficulty. I actually want you to, try to get a sense of how other people at the table are struggling with the noise too.
Right.
The odds are that if you're struggling with the noise,
Everybody is.
everyone.
Right.
And so I think a lot of people with hearing loss tend to think of their own situation and
they're the only ones, right? Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times I'll recommend, I use my own experience. When I go out with my friends, I always put myself in the middle of the table. That way I can see everyone. I'm closest to them. I always try to face my patients when I talk to them. I never type on a keyboard while I'm with my patients. I'm always looking at their face so that they can see my face and I can see their face.
Right.
And that's just as important in a noisy situation. So no matter how much money you're willing to spend on a hearing aid, you can get the best hearing aid in the world, and you're still going to struggle in those situations. And then good communication strategies, such as just looking at who you're talking to and then asking them to look at you, is something I use to help patients. And then another tip that I like to provide is I will ask patients, when you have to ask people to repeat themselves, do they get frustrated? And a lot of times patients will say yes. Okay, I'm like, let's work on that. How can we ask someone to repeat what they said without making them frustrated? Let's tell them what we did hear and ask for what we didn't hear. You said we were going to go to a restaurant tomorrow. What restaurant did you say? Instead of saying, what did you say?
Right.
Let them know that you heard part of what they said. And
where you're actively listening. They want the reaffirmation that you're actually paying attention.
And so we'll work on communication strategies and just try to make it so it's not all about them. It can be about how they can, help other people talk in a better way as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And so, I one of the other things I like to ask people is like, tell me, we all have these patients who come across in our lives who really make a big impact on us, right? I call them patient stories. Many of us have a handful, many of us have more. So tell me one of your favorite patient stories.
So I got many of them. I'm going to tell you one that happened recently. I had a gentleman come in and he is in a wheelchair, pretty severely impaired, and he had 12-year-old hearing aids, actually a 12-year-old hearing aid just in one ear. And then I asked him where he got it. He said, I got it from a buddy. And I was like, okay. Well, what's going on with your other ear? Oh, there's nothing you can do with that ear. It's completely gone. I'm like, well, why is that? Who told you that? And he told me that the doctor at a very reputable hearing center in Los Angeles said that you can't hear in that ear. And I said, did they recommend a cochlear implant? Did they recommend, implantable devices? And said, nope, there's just no hearing. And something I've learned is not to fully trust everything the patient says. And no matter what I was saying, he's like, there's nothing that you can do with this ear. I'm only here to get a new hearing aid for the one ear. And I said, well, I'm going to test your hearing anyways. I'm going to test both ears. And if you're right, you're right. It's going to take me 2 minutes to do it. No harm, no foul. I tested his hearing, and yes, he was right. He's got very severe hearing loss. But when I turned the volume up enough for him to listen to speech, he understood about 85%.
That's pretty good.
Very good. And so I told him and his wife, I'm like, you have usable hearing in this ear. Very usable hearing. And he was still in denial. I was like, no, then why have I gone 20 years and no one told me that? And he's had a couple of bad experiences in the past where he was so against getting a hearing aid for that ear. The patient also suffers from narcolepsy. And at this point in the appointment, he could tell he was about to go out. And he told his wife, you need to take care of the rest of the appointment. So he falls asleep, and me and his wife start talking. And I asked her, are you, and he's very severely disabled. And I asked her, are you his power of attorney? And she said yes. I'm like, okay, we need to make a decision for him, and we're going to see how he responds. If he doesn't like it, then we try.
Right.
So I got him a hearing aid for both ears. I told her, I'm like, he might not be happy about doing this, but I want you to try to calm him down and get him in here for his next appointment. Came in for his next appointment, kind of skeptical about the whole thing. I put a hearing aid in his ear, and he had this weird look in his face, and I thought he was upset, and he just broke down crying as I was turning the hearing aid on, and he said his wife's name, and he's like, I need you to grab my hand. I'm hearing you out of my left ear. And that was from a patient who was extremely stubborn and not allowing him to, drive the appointment and sticking to my guns. We were able to get him to admit his vulnerability at the time of the fitting. So it took us a while to get there. It was confrontational at the front, but, we were able to get him a solution, and just seeing him tear up the way that he did and realizing that he'd gone 20 years without hearing in the one ear was a pretty fun appointment. I think all of us were in tears by the end of it.
Yeah, that's great. That's why you go to work every day, right? Those types of moments. That's awesome. And to, healthy skepticism, right? Not total skepticism, but healthy skepticism. Like, hey, I'll measure it for myself, and if you're right, you're right. That's awesome. That's really awesome. Good for you. That's a great win for him. And for you.
It was. I'm looking forward to seeing him back, and I think his whole perception of life has completely changed. I think it was a really great appointment,
and that's why you go to work every day. And so, that's what would I say? That's a tougher one, right? That's a pretty facile patient to have to deal with. And when you talk to patients about their hearing loss, like, so what are the common things they say, roadblocks that they say to you? Like, what are the more common ones or more interesting ones you like dealing with, maybe?
My favorite one, absolute favorite one, is the vanity. The patients who don't want anyone to know they have a hearing loss, and they don't want anyone to see the hearing aid. And I don't tell everyone I have a hearing loss. There's some patients where I like, okay, I can tell right away they're a vain person. And I don't mention my hearing loss. I wait till the very end of the appointment when they say, I don't want hearing aids. I'm vain. I don't want anyone to see it. And I've been with this patient for,
90
60,
minutes,
70 minutes at this point. And I say, we've been together for 60, 70 minutes. Have you noticed my hearing aid? And then they go, you're wearing hearing aids? I had no clue. And it's just the reaction I get from patients. It's just fun for me and for them. And it's oftentimes the hurdle that gets them over. Oh, I guess you can make them small. And they're not these big, bulky beige devices that we are so used to seeing our grandparents in, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Right. You can really make them pretty small. And that's a fun roadblock or a barrier that I have broken down many, many times.
That's great. And what's your second favorite, just out of curiosity?
I think my second favorite, with hearing aids, when you do get them, or when patients get them, I would say 98% of them will comment on their own voice. And I always say, I've worn hearing aids my entire life. And as an audiologist, I get to wear new hearing aids every couple months. And every single pair of hearing aids that I have ever worn, my own voice sounds different for the first couple of days.
With each different change?
With each different change.
Oh, interesting.
There's always a different way that the hearing aid produced your own voice, and it just sounds different.
Because of the digital processing, I assume?
Yeah, or whether it's occlusion or digital processing or, fast or slow compression.
Right.
Whatever it is, they have all sounded different to me, and it takes me a couple days. And so I always tell patients, I'm the expert in hearing aids. I study them, I've worn them, I know all about them. And even I have the symptom that you're experiencing, and it does go away. It does get better. And if it doesn't, it's really easy to resolve it. And so I think that's a barrier or roadblock I get sometimes when patients are getting hearing aids for the first time, and they're hearing their own voice for the first time in a way they haven't heard. Right. That can be unsettling for a lot of people. And if I can, ease them a little bit to, have them buy into, because I think with hearing aids, it takes an adaptation period. You don't just put them on like glasses and boom, you're ready to go.
Right.
Even new glasses give me a headache because it takes me a second to adapt to them. And a lot of patients are hoping for this on switch that's just going to fix their hearing. And if I can explain to them that it takes a little time and with dedication, you're going to hear better, then I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, it's not like installing an app.
Right.
Right. I mean, there is a certain process to it. That's great stuff. I really appreciate you sharing that with me, Jacob. So, one of the things one of the questions I love hearing from people is, say you're at a award ceremony, you've just been given a Lifetime Achievement Award. Who do you thank? Like, who are the people you thank for getting you to where you are today? It sounds like maybe the audiologist from your childhood, but who do you thank? Who are the people?
I mean, you're definitely right about my audiologist. He was there the day I graduated, and so that was someone who played a huge role. I think, when I was in college, I was fortunate enough to run into an alumni of the social organization I was in, and he had worked for a hearing aid manufacturer, and he got me in for an internship and really got me into the world of audiology and he really set me up for success in multiple phases within my life, whether that was getting me the internship I got or, leading to the program I decided to apply for and getting accepted to that program. I think he played a really instrumental part. So it just a really random connection that we met at a football game in college, and someone that made a really deep impact professionally.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great conversation. A question I do have for you is how can people get a hold of you, Jacob?
So you can visit our website, southbayhearing.com, or you just type in South Bay Hearing, and we're just in Torrance, California. And then the best way to get an appointment with me or to get a hold of me is to call my office. I don't know if you want me to share my number.
Sure. What's the number? Yeah.
It's 310-375-6161. And that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
That's great. So we've had Dr. Jacob Iveland here today. He's from South Bay Hearing. He's done a great job. He's been an awesome guest. Thank you so much for coming on to Listen Up. I really appreciate your time and you sharing your expertise and your personal experience. It's been really great to hear from somebody who's proverbially on both sides of the chair, if you will. You're the patient and the doctor. So it's a great experience. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.